everybody, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling something I think a lot of you out there are going to relate to, and that is the quest for fluency. In this deep dive, we're going to unpack how one person managed to become fluent in English without ever traveling abroad.
It is really interesting. So many people think you have to buy a plane ticket to become fluent, but this deep dive really challenges that assumption.
Yeah.
And it shows that you can create an immersive experience without going anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like they created their own little world of English, like a personal language playground or something. And we're going to talk about how they transform their whole environment, even how they talk to themselves.
Yes, even thinking in English, which is
That deep.
yeah, that's a whole other level.
Okay, so let's talk about this English bubble thing. What exactly did they do? Like, did they cover their walls with English grammar rules or something?
Well, not exactly. It was more about making small changes that had a big impact. One of the first things they did was switch their phone's language to English.
Oh, that's actually pretty smart. I mean, you're always on your phone, so you're constantly seeing and interacting with the language. I bet they learned a ton of new words just from using apps and stuff.
Totally. And that was just the beginning. They really integrated English into every part of their life in ways that most people wouldn't even think of. Take watching TV, for example. They basically binge-watched English TV shows with subtitles.
So just watching a show can help you become more fluent. I mean, I love to binge watch, but I never thought of it as a language learning tool.
Well, it's all about exposing yourself to natural language patterns. Like the rhythm, intonation, vocabulary, all in context. You might think you're just relaxing, but your brain is actually absorbing a lot more than you realize.
Okay, this is making me rethink my Netflix queue for sure.
Right.
So it wasn't just TV though, right? I mean, what else did they do?
They listen to a ton of podcasts, especially ones with casual conversations.
Oh, I get that. It's like you're listening in on a conversation between friends, which is perfect for picking up slang and everyday expressions.
Exactly. And they also listened to a lot of music and would sing along, even if they didn't know all the words.
Wait a minute, so you're saying I don't have to be like a professional singer to make this work? Because let's just say my karaoke skills are, well, let's just say they need work.
No, you don't need to be a perfect singer. It's more about getting used to the sounds of the language, the pronunciation, the rhythm, and just having fun with it.
Okay, so we've talked about how they surrounded themselves with English through technology, TV, podcasts, and music. But there's one big thing missing here: speaking practice. How in the world did they practice speaking if they weren't talking with native speakers?
This is what gets really interesting. They used a method that sounds kind of strange, but it actually works. They talk to themselves.
Wait, are you serious? You're telling me that the key to fluency is having conversations with myself? I mean, I do that sometimes, but I thought that was just, my inner thoughts going crazy.
I know it might sound weird, but think about it. You're practicing building sentences, pronouncing words, expressing your thoughts, all in English, and without the pressure of talking to another person. It's like a safe space to experiment and gain confidence.
Okay, I'm actually kind of intrigued by this, but wouldn't you just be repeating your own mistakes if you're the only one talking? How did they make sure they were actually learning correctly?
Well, that's where another technique comes in called shadowing. So they would listen to short audio clips of native speakers, pause the recording, and then repeat what they heard, trying to copy the pronunciation and intonation as closely as possible.
Oh, so it's like having a virtual pronunciation coach right there with you. I can see how that would help you polish your accent and sound more natural. So did they do anything else to really solidify their speaking skills?
Okay, so they were talking to themselves and doing the shadowing thing all in their own home. But what I'm really curious about is the mental side of fluency. Like how do you actually train your brain to think in another language? Did they meditate or use some kind of brain training app or something? Well, it's definitely a crucial part of becoming fluent that often gets overlooked. You're absolutely right. They realize that it's not just about being able to speak the language, it's about being able to think in it.
Right.
Without having to translate everything in your head.
Right, that makes sense. But how do you actually do that? Like, did they have any specific techniques for rewiring their brain?
Yeah, they did actually. One of their favorite methods was journaling every day in English.
Journaling. Interesting. So they were writing down all their deep thoughts and dreams in English. That seems kind of tough if you're not already fluent.
Well, it wasn't about writing perfectly grammatically correct sentences or anything. It was more about just getting their thoughts down on paper in English, even if it was just a few sentences at first. They said it helped them figure out what words or grammar rules they were struggling with so they knew what to focus on.
So it was like a workout for their brain getting those mental muscles working in English. But did they only write in English? I mean, we're always thinking right, not just when we're writing in a journal.
That's a great point. And they actually took it a step further. They started making everyday decisions and solving problems in their head, but all in English. Like, let's say they were trying to decide what to eat for dinner. Instead of thinking about it in their native language, they would force themselves to think through it in English.
Oh, that's a cool trick. I never thought of that. So they were like constantly immersing their brain in English, even when they weren't actively studying. But let's face it, language learning isn't always easy. What about all those times when you mess up or get frustrated or just feel like giving up? How did they deal with that?
Well, they were really honest about making a lot of mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that they didn't see those mistakes as failures. They saw them as opportunities to learn.
Yeah, that's so important. I think a lot of people are afraid to speak English because they don't want to sound silly or make mistakes.
Exactly. And they emphasize that being kind to yourself is really important when you're learning a language. It's okay to stumble. It's okay to make mistakes. It's all part of the process.
I love that. It's about shifting your mindset from being afraid to make mistakes to being excited to learn from them. Did they talk about how they stayed motivated? Learning a language can take a long time, and it's easy to lose motivation along the way.
Yeah, one thing that really stood out to me was their emphasis on having fun. Remember, they made language learning like a game. They watched movies, listened to music, found creative ways to use English in their everyday life.
That makes a lot of sense. When you're enjoying something, you're more likely to keep doing it. But they weren't learning in isolation, right? Did they ever interact with other English speakers?
They did. They talked about being part of online communities and connecting with other language learners from all over the world. They said it made a huge difference in their motivation and progress.
Oh, yeah. I can totally relate to that. Having that sense of community, knowing that other people are going through the same struggles, it's really helpful and encouraging. What kind of online communities did they recommend?
Well, they mentioned a bunch of different platforms. Language exchange websites were a big one because they could talk with native English speakers and practice their conversational skills.
Yeah, those are awesome. It's like you're helping each other out. You help them with your language, and they help you with English. What about other online resources?
They also liked online forums where people shared tips and advice about language learning. They said it was a great place to ask questions, learn about different learning methods, and connect with more experienced learners.
It's like having a whole team of language mentors right there at your fingertips. And they even use social media for language learning, which is pretty interesting.
Yep, they followed English-speaking influencers and joined groups related to their hobbies and even participated in online discussions.
Wow, so they were really active on social media, not just passively scrolling through their feed. They really took charge of their own learning and weren't afraid to try new things. What would you say was the biggest takeaway from their story? Like, what was that aha moment that changed the way they thought about learning English?
Yeah, so they used all these online resources to really dive into the language. But what did they ultimately learn from all of this? Like, was there a specific moment where everything clicked for them?
I think the biggest lesson for them was that fluency isn't something you achieve overnight. You know, it's not about being perfect or never making a mistake.
Right.
It's about being able to communicate, express yourself, connect with people, even if you make a few mistakes along the way.
So it's more about the journey than the destination, right?
Exactly. And they really emphasize that anyone can become fluent no matter where they live or what their background is, as long as they have the right mindset and the right approach. That's so inspiring. It really shows you that you don't need to be surrounded by native speakers to become fluent. But did they have any advice for staying motivated and pushing through those times when you feel like you're not making any progress?
You know, they had a really interesting take on motivation. They said it wasn't about forcing yourself to study for hours every day or memorizing tons of vocabulary words.
Right.
It was about finding what you're passionate about and making language learning a part of that.
So it's about finding that intrinsic motivation that comes from within, right? The kind of motivation that keeps you going even when it gets tough. But how do you actually do that? Like, did they give any practical tips?
Oh, yeah. They had some great ideas.
Yeah.
One thing they suggested was connecting your language learning with your hobbies. So, like, if you love cooking, you could watch cooking shows in English or read recipes or even try cooking dishes from different English-speaking cultures.
Oh, I love that. It makes language learning so much more fun and engaging, and I bet you remember things better when you're actually interested in what you're learning.
For sure. They also talked about setting realistic goals and celebrating your progress along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of trying to become perfectly fluent right away, they focused on mastering one small thing at a time. Like, improving their pronunciation or learning new words related to a specific topic.
Right, so it's like breaking down that big goal of fluency into smaller, more manageable steps.
Exactly. And they said it's really important to not compare yourself to other people. Everyone learns at their own pace. And the key is to focus on your own progress, not on how fast other people are learning.
That's such an important point. It's so easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to others, especially with social media and everything. But their message is clear: focus on your own journey, celebrate your wins, be patient with yourself. So before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to ask you a question. What's one thing you've always wanted to do but felt like you couldn't because you weren't confident enough in your English?
That's a good question.
It could be anything, really. Traveling to an English-speaking country, making friends with people from other cultures, applying for a job that requires English skills. Whatever it is, don't let language hold you back from achieving your dreams.
Yeah, this person's story is a great example of how you don't have to wait until you're perfectly fluent to start doing the things you want to do. You can start today with whatever resources you have available.
Exactly. So what's one small step you can take today to move closer to your language learning goals? Maybe it's watching a short video, listening to a podcast, having a conversation with a language exchange partner. Every step you take, no matter how small, gets you closer to fluency. And remember, we're here to support you on your journey.
You can find us online on all the usual social media platforms or visit our website for more tips and resources. And we'd love to hear from you about your language learning experiences, the challenges you're facing, the successes you're celebrating.
So keep practicing, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep that love of language alive.
And that's it for this deep dive. Until next time, happy language learning, everyone.
Until next time, keep practicing and stay confident.